Welcome, skeptics and truth seekers, to Schoolhouse Crock, the podcast that fearlessly exposes the real deal behind public education in the state of Colorado. I am your host, Stacey Castile, and on this show, we are not here to sugarcoat. We are here to unveil the truth, challenge the norms, and unpack the crock of you-know-what that often goes unnoticed in the realm of education. Today's podcast episode is going to discuss what would have been Senate Bill 24-059. And although this does not specifically affect education, it does affect our youth. And I want to cover it because I feel like our youth, whether it is in the classroom or at home, are being underserved currently by the aspect of caring about mental health, but not truly caring about mental health. I do have Commissioner Scott James here with me today to discuss this, as he had worked very closely with Senator Kirkmeyer on trying to get this legislation passed. I do want to throw out a disclaimer that any views that I specifically say are the views of me and not of Commissioner James himself. Commissioner James was elected as our county commissioner for District 2 in 2018 and took office in 2019, and then he was reelected in 2022. Thank you so much for joining us today, Commissioner James.
And it's really the honor of my life to be able to serve the county I grew up in. So thank you for having me on your show.
So I guess just a quick little background. What was or what could have been Senate Bill 24-059?
Senate Bill 59 was a system of care legislation that would have directed the Behavioral Health Administration to develop an extensive system of care when it came to adolescent mental behavioral health. Let me try to draw parallels with you. And one of the kind people that frequently testified with me on behalf of Senate Bill 2459 would tell her story. And while I'll leave her name out of it, she would tell the story of how she was diagnosed with breast cancer. When she was levied with that diagnosis, the doors opened up. Boy, her doctor said, you'll see this specialist and you'll take this test and you'll receive this treatment. And she knew exactly what to do. And for the last 5 years, she has been cancer-free. Hallelujah. Praise Jesus. We've got a great system that takes care of people that receive that physical diagnosis. She also talked about her younger brother, who was a situation very similar to mine that we'll get into. She talked about her younger brother, who was adopted and having severe mental and behavioral health issues. So they would go to mental and behavioral health providers. If they could find one that would accept a new patient, they would go to mental and behavioral health providers, and there was no system that they could plug into. It was random and happenstance, and he's got this outbreak and this situation, and he would receive different diagnoses and different treatment protocols. And why can't we have the same system of care in mental behavioral health that we have in physical health? I would argue that while it has its flaws, I still believe that the physical health care system, United States of America, is one of the best in the world. You can argue all you want about payer, but I think what we have presented by the free market is an outstanding system. And I'm telling you, she received her diagnosis of breast cancer, and like clockwork, she knew what to do. Why can't we have that same kind of system when it comes to mental and behavioral health? And so what Senator Kirkmeyer was attempting to do through 2459 is to basically direct the Behavioral Health Administration to establish that system of care, to address payer issues. Certainly a lot of folks that engage with that are on the Medicaid system, but to also be able to accept private payer insurance and that type of thing, and to be able to have an available system. And as I often said in my testimony, for that single mom of 3 who just needed help for her kid, what number do I call? Where do I go? That system does not exist right now. And there is a reason why we have, quite frankly, a suicide epidemic among our youth.
I agree completely. You know, one of the reasons that I actually started getting involved on the councils that I do serve on for Weld County was because when my daughter was in 6th grade, she was being tested for speech therapy through the school district, and the school district had to call me and tell me, and it was
Sure.
the school psychologist that had called me because the speech pathologist had a family emergency, so she was not able to fulfill those duties. And so the school psychologist said, "Is there anything else I can help you with?" Well, my daughter is a hoarder. Like, it's insane to me. And there was just so many things. And I started crying on the phone with this woman. And I said, I just don't know what to do. She's doing this. She's doing that. Like, what do I do? She doesn't clean her room. She has mice in there. There's spiders everywhere. She doesn't even care. Like, what do I do? What do I do? And she actually called and reported me to social services for neglecting my child.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I wanted to get involved in the county because I wanted to be able to say, when we have a parent who's going, I don't know what to do with my kid. Like, I don't know how to handle this. Well, how do we address this? Where do we go? A system of care, a process that we can do. What number can we call? And that was honestly my hopes to understand that, because it was mind-blowing to me that there was nothing already out there. There's no, like, this is what you need to do. And I know that, the level of behavioral outbursts vary, right? I mean, one end of the spectrum is probably not cleaning your room and hoarding stuff, whereas
Sure.
the other is probably a lot more violent and severe. And so I feel like as a society, as a state, we do need something like that, because I know you and I are not alone in this. We're not the only two parents in Colorado that have sat there and gone, what do I do? Where do I go? How do I get my kid help?
And that is, I believe in the concept of whole person wellness. I believe in the concept that you should take care of your physical person as well as your mental, spiritual, emotional person. And I believe that the mental and behavioral health issues need to be destigmatized, because trust me, you need to take care of your head the same way you take care of your heart. And we need to find a way to develop that system that will allow people to plug into the care that they need. Now, I am frustrated because you know me to be a free market guy and a non-governmental intervention guy. I'm frustrated that the free market has not presented this. And I think it's because of the stigma that exists around mental health, because of payer issues, because of the way that insurances deal with the treatment of mental and behavioral health. So we need to knock down some of those barriers. Just as sure as, if I were to trip on your step when I walked out of here and twist my ankle, I can go down to the emergency room. You twisted your ankle, and there would be a protocol by which they took care of me, and my insurance would cover it. There needs to be the same kind of thing of, I'm feeling depressed, I'm emotional, perhaps I have suicidal ideations. There needs to be the same kind of system that we can plug into, and perhaps there needs to be a bit of a governmental stimuli. I'm not talking about a sole payer. I think where people bring private insurance to the board the table rather than they should. But there needs to be a little more structure, a little more guardrail put on by a government system there than what perhaps exists in our physical healthcare system.
Well, and especially when we have a governmental system that says, I know best, right? Like, listen to me. I know what's best for you. But here we're just going to let you try to flounder in a pitch black room and try and find the light switch that we're not going to give you any direction as to which way you need to be going.
And the light may not come on when you flip the switch.
Yeah.
And that's, there's a big conversation. And part of what Senate Bill 24-59 would have done was it established workforce development programs and training programs, because part of the problem that exists in the system is a complete lack of providers.
Yes, yeah.
And so why the free market is not coming forward with providers, we need to understand why, and we need to knock down some of those barriers. And it could be because there is a confusion from a payer situation and what insurances cover and do not cover. So that all needs to be addressed, whether it be from a regulatory standpoint or a free market standpoint. We need to bust down whatever barriers exist and get there. But yeah, part of the problem is we simply don't have the providers. Senate Bill 24-59 would have provided money for training and would have provided a workforce development aspect of it as well, which it was a very comprehensive bill. It came out of Ledge Affairs in the very beginning with a $1.1 billion fiscal note. Nobody knows the state budget better than Senator Kirkmeyer, and so she was able to whittle that down to a couple of $1 million, basically. But the assumptions that were made by the legislative analysts were completely wrong. They felt like everybody who would have entered the system of care would have been on the government dime, so to speak, would have been like a Medicaid. And that's not the case. Most of us do enjoy some form of private insurance. But the assumptions that Ledge Affairs made, in my opinion, were political in nature. because ultimately, in the end, the Behavioral Health Administration fought this bill, and I hear that the governor called it a few favors and killed it in the end. But we're
But
not
they
done.
care about the kids. They want to,
Well.
help them. We passed House Bill 24-1039, which was the non-legal name change.
Yeah.
Because we need to do this for the children, for their mental and behavioral health. This makes them feel included and safe in school. And that's the thing that I think that is the most frustrating to me, from the educational aspect is that we know behavioral health issues are happening inside our schools. We have children who are disrupting class. And sometimes they have legit behavioral health issues, right? But then other times they see the attention they get. They see, I'm going to be the first to admit, I learned probably in middle school that if I could engage the teacher in a conversation, I could distract them off of doing whatever it was that we were supposed to be doing for that day. And these, some kids have now taken it up a notch and are, having outbreaks. And if we're having these issues, and let's say it's just specifically kids who truly do have behavioral health issues or need some assistance with that, they're not learning, but neither are the kids around them. And so then it's like, well, okay, let's stop and look. Specifically for Greeley-Evans District 6, only 18% of our students can perform math at grade level, and only 34% of our students can read at grade level. So we're stuck looking, is it the teachers? Is it the curriculum? Is it the students? Like, there's a couple of different factors here that we need to evaluate. And if we are not taking out some of those variables, right, saying like, okay, we've addressed the behavioral health issues, we've provided this, we've been able to help our parents, our families, our youth get this assistance. Now we can go back to the, board and say, look at how our kids have improved, or look at how, there's no change, or, whatever it is. We're not taking that out. But yet we need to start universal preschool now, because that's going to help our children be able to read at grade level. See, that's why kids can't read at grade level, according to the governor, because they're not getting into school soon enough. They're not doing preschool. So if we provide preschool, then especially, the low income, then they're going to be able to read. But I don't really think that that's the problem. That may factor into it, yes. But when we're not addressing some of these other issues, like behavioral and mental health, we are hurting our students in the classroom in the long run. And then take it to the other side, the teachers. There are multitudes of teachers who are leaving because they don't want to be in the classroom. I had a former teacher tell me that she had a parent cussing her out, and she went to her principal and said, hey, I need help with this parent. And the principal's like, well, until she calls you, more extreme words like what she called me, I don't really care. Well, who wants to be, unless you're an elected official, you don't want to be.
Well, I don't want it either, trust me. But that sometimes I got it coming, so I understand.
But, we aren't retaining good quality teachers because of the way that they're being treated by students. And it's not necessarily, the students just being a jerk. It could potentially be that there are some behavioral and mental health issues. And I know, like, one of the examples that you said that I think has really resonated with me, because I think that this might be the case for a lot, but your son had mentioned that, his brain was like a thunderstorm. And I think there are a lot of kids that have that, and they don't know how to express it. They don't know how to sort it all out and advocate for themselves.
There's so many. It's not. I'm 61 years old. I graduated high school in 1981, Valley High class of 81. I grew up, even though, in a quote-unquote divorced home. My mom was divorced when I was 7. Still, my mom loved Greg and I. And I grew up in LaSalle in a very, very, very normal kind of a situation, or what I would deem normal. Things have changed. And I think foundationally and societally we have changed. And when I hear you very passionately speak about what you just spoke of, I think that what is the foundational connector in this? And in my opinion, it's the family, and how we empower the family, how the family still needs to be the most foundational unit of our society. And quite frankly, here in 2024, the family is fractured.
100%.
It's not the foundational basis. So, and ultimately, I will get to what I think will fix it all is revival or bust, baby. but it's another conversation. Let me tell you about Jack, if you don't mind, about
Yes,
my
please
son.
do.
My wife and I were married a little later in life. I was 34, Julie 33 when we got married. Julie worked for the mighty Frontier Airlines at the time, and so we had that marry me, fly for free perk. So my gosh, we did. We traveled around, had a little fun, woke up one day, said, geez, we're 40, maybe we ought to try to have kids. So we tried and tried and tried, and then after several rounds of I got to get the term right, well, certainly of fertility treatment and in vitro fertilization and that type of thing, it was determined that Julie lacked an enzyme that allowed the embryo to truly plant on the uterine wall. So bottom line, less than a 1% chance you're going to have kids. So you deal with that for a little bit, and then you decide. We came to the conclusion that we were going to adopt. We went through several, not went through them, but we interviewed several private agencies. And we ultimately came to the conclusion, and it was with a little help from a kind recruiter in Larimer County, we ultimately came to the conclusion that we wanted to adopt through Larimer County Social Services. Julie and I at that time, and continue to still live in Johnstown. But when we were first married, we lived in Fort Collins for a year. That's my wife's home. And we had a couple of dogs that we took to a vet there. And we were referred to the recruiter, the Larimer County Social Services foster adopt recruiter, through our veterinarian. And basically what the vet said is if they take care of their kid anyway they take care of their dogs, they're going to be great parents. So I guess that's a pretty high recommendation. We went through the Pride program. Jack came into our life. He was 7 months of age when he came to live with us. My son was born addicted to both alcohol and meth. We've had fetal alcohol syndrome since alcohol was alcohol. Meth at that time, the understandings of how that chemical affects developmentally the brain were largely unknown. But it's interesting how in times as Jack has grown up and we've gone through our life, that we have had conversations with other parents that, oh yeah, there are similar things. The story that you pointed out was a few years ago when my son was 13, 14 years of age. We were outside on a summer evening when one of those thunderstorms rolled through that there's no cloud to ground lightning strikes. All the lightning stays up in the clouds and the clouds just churn, and I think they're beautiful. And I said, son, look at that thunderstorm. And he said, Dad, that's the way it feels in my head. And so I got a little glimpse into he thinks differently than you and I, Stacy, do, to no fault of his own. This is the way he has been wired. And so therefore we have sought help with how to allow him to cope in a society that you and I and all of us are expected to cope in. My son has struggled with alcohol and marijuana dependencies, severe behavioral outbreaks, a lot of physical damage to our home. Never really any physical damage to one another, but in an outbreak when Jack was struggling with some alcohol here this last spring, he attempted to take his life. Thank God he was not successful. But he spent at that time 6 months in a qualified residential treatment program. And I applaud that program for making some significant changes in my son's life. But we came to that QRTP through a lot of consternation, through a lot of, we didn't know what we didn't know. And as I've told many people, you know my wife, and she's brilliant, and she's determined, and she's driven, and I'm adult, but crying out loud, I'm a county commissioner that has a Department of Human Services at my disposal, and we had trouble navigating the system. Again, imagine being that single mom of 3 kids who's got a kid that's experiencing behavioral health issues, and she just needs help.
Yeah.
And so advocating for our son became a full-time job in which I could talk to our DHS director and some people in our department, and they said, oh, chase this down, chase this down, chase. I didn't receive preferential treatment, don't take it that way. But I was able to access information that's not so readily available to other people.
Yeah.
Is my point. And that's what 24-59 would have done, is establish that system of care to where you or any other mom could call a number. I have a behavioral health issue, and they would plug you into a system. And for some reason, the Behavioral Health Administration, via the governor, thought that was a bad idea. I can tell you it's all politics. I fought against the establishment of the Behavioral Health Administration 3 years ago because I just saw it as just that, more bureaucracy. And golly, I was right on that one. And they struggle. Now, ultimately, our friend Barbara Kirkmeyer was able to get a one in the fact that there was another Department of Human Services piece of legislation that ran this year that had to do with high acuity care. High acuity care it would plug into a system of care, but it's a microcosm of what the overall system would be. High acuity would be for people like my son, who was in crisis at the time, and they were concerned with. You may have heard some of the stories of Department of Human Services not having beds and kids living in emergency rooms for 30 days on end, or people living in a DHS office for 30 days on end. Those are people that are in a high acuity crisis, and there's an absolute extreme bed shortage in this state. And so this high acuity care bill established some additional funding and some additional openings of hopefully bed space. It should result in bed space. But my crafty friend, Senator Kirkmeyer, the pieces of the legislation in 59 that would have established the system, not necessarily the funding mechanism, not necessarily the workforce development, but at least it would directed the BHA to establish the system, she drafted into the high acuity care bill. So we're going to get the system, the funding piece, the workforce development piece, we're going to have to work on in subsequent legislation. So bottom line is, we're at least going to get a start. We're going to, if the Behavioral Health Administration couldn't do it on their own, we the people are going to direct them on how to do it, and that's what we're working on now. So yeah, all is not bleak in the fact that Barb could draft that onto, and I forget what bill number that is, but the high acuity care bill. And so we're starting. We're starting.
Yes, definitely. Well, and I think one of the things that you had also said a couple of weeks ago was investing in our children, and at what point are you going to do that? And I think that you're right. We need to invest in them now when it's these little issues, because if we don't, then they're 22 and they're having issues. And then we're having the argument of, do the police get involved? Do we have a social worker that can come to the call and get involved and help, decompress the situation? There was an incident, unfortunately, there's a couple of incidences, but there was one where a kid was having, I say kid, but he was probably early 20s, was having a behavioral mental health episode crisis, in it. Mm-hmm. Police became involved. He did not comply. And he ended up, unfortunately, dying due to this situation. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if we would have invested in him when he was younger, could we have maybe changed some of his outcome? Could we have
Perhaps.
maybe given him a different route to take, or an option? And I feel like if we can invest in these kids now, I would rather, as a taxpayer, right? Because that's who it's going to come down to, who's footing this bill. As a taxpayer, I would rather take care of it now and get these families the help before there's, so much devastation because of it. But then also before it gets to a point where they're an adult, maybe they become incarcerated. Well, who's paying for the incarceration at the end of the day? The taxpayer is.
Well, and ultimately, it is our opinion that 2459 would have saved the taxpayer money, because of it would have made some of the elements in the system of care, would have made some of the elements of care more affordable and more readily available, and so therefore ultimately the taxpayer is going to be saved money. I mean, we could see that in the way it freed up beds and in the way it the way it classified some of the different levels of treatment that were needed. So it was exciting to see the potential for cost savings there. But it's interesting. A county commissioner likes to brag about building a good road. Boy, have you seen County Road 49? Thing of beauty, isn't it? A county commissioner loves to. We like to talk about building infrastructure, because infrastructure is solid, and we need infrastructure. We need just drive around, for crying out loud. I'm a big transportation advocate. I have been advocating for I-25 and Northern Colorado roadways for 25 years. But if we brag on building physical infrastructure, shouldn't we start bragging on fortifying our human infrastructure? I'm a big one on, we need to invest in our people as well. I'll give you an example. This last legislative session, the only thing that seemed to be successful was the governor's got to get him a choo-choo. I mean, I'm telling you, the entire focus of this last legislative session all kind of circled around how can we fortify and build the Front Range passenger rail. And I look, somehow we feel better about ourselves. I I understand that, geez, we're going to be such a cosmopolitan society now that we have a train that nobody's going to ride on and doesn't even come close to Weld County.
Or if they do ride on it, they're going to be doing drugs, like RTD. Right?
Well, and you have to ask why RTD suddenly needs a full-time police department.
Yes, yes.
That's another conversation. But my point being is we somehow have conjured up $2 billion in the great oil and gas compromise, which don't get me started on that. But you might have heard the compromise that the governor brokered between the oil and gas industry and environmentalists. And suddenly, all the testimony that we've ever heard about moms who have kids with nosebleeds because they live next to oil and gas rigs, that, oh my gosh, my baby can't go outside and play because of the nasty oil and gas in Weld County. That all went away for the low price of $138 million a year. It's amazing to me how every nose stopped bleeding, every child stopped having headaches for $138 million a year. Now, that's neither here nor there. It's 90% of the oil and gas development in the state of Colorado comes out of Weld County. It will largely transfer wealth from Weld County into the metro area to fortify a transit system that no one wants to ride on to begin with. Why couldn't we take $138 million and invest it into our damn kids' mental health?
Yep.
Can I say damn on your show?
Yes.
Don't get me started. It's a matter, governing is nothing more than a matter of priorities. And what priorities are we as a society going to hold? The governor wants a choo-choo. Somehow he's going to get him a choo-choo. I want well kids. You pick.
I would have to agree with you because, like, when we look at where the United States ranks in terms of other countries, in terms of our quality of education, right? We're not high. And even the state of Colorado in the country is not high on that list. And so we are not investing in our future, but we're pretending to invest in our future by mandating the electric vehicles and by and when every time I hear about the train, I always think of, I don't know if you ever watched The Simpsons, but the episode The Monorail, and it was
The Simpsons had predicted the future anyway.
Yes,
so
yes.
what?
Whole scheme essentially. In fact, they even take a dig at Enron during it. Not to date myself. And so I mean, it was a joke. It didn't ever work. And I can't even help but think, remember when they opened up the light rail out to DIA? And the first day, like within the first couple of hours, I think, of it being up and running, it crashed.
Yes.
Well, the system
Broke
went down. Yeah.
Broke down. If you want to go down the transit rabbit trail, we certainly can. One of the conversations I've had many times when it comes to transit in the state of Colorado is where it is truly, excuse me, I'm so sorry, where it truly is impactful, or in places that have the population density to make it impactful. We point to New York, we point to Los Angeles, we point to Portland. Has an effective BART up there is fairly effective because they have the densities. State of Colorado, we don't have the densities. So what did you see come out of land use planning this year when the governor stripped away local land use planning from local governments, developed this housing opportunity goals in 1313 was the House bill. I'm so sorry. Basically, they're mandating housing density now because, my gosh, if you don't have the density to make the choo-choo work, we're going to mandate the density. And what they seem to forget, and this is something I know because I grew up here, I'm a Westerner. Colorado's still the West. We're Westerners. We're independent. We're free-thinking, and we don't want to be reliant on a train to take us from point A to point B if that train runs there. Look, if I'm going to go down to see a Bronco game on a Sunday afternoon and I don't want to fight the traffic downtown, well, then it makes sense.
Yeah.
But for most of us to use it in a day-in, day-out commute, it makes sense for very little of us, and even fewer as times go by. As I chase down another rabbit trail, post-pandemic, we're still at about 52% ridership on Mustang and on a couple of the other CDOT-run transits. About 52% ridership of pre-pandemic levels. A, people just don't want to go back there. B, John Caldera, rather tongue-in-cheek, said last year during their free fare for cleaner air in the month of August that, RTD has now solved the homeless issue because they'll all be riding the trains all day long.
Yep.
Now that aside, what we're talking about is a system that's simply not convenient for the bulk of the population. And so we continue to funnel money into it because that's somehow what makes us feel more cosmopolitan, and that will fix the greenhouse gas issue and everything else. No, we need to invest in our human infrastructure. Back to the topic of your show.
Yes.
That's what we need to do.
I agree completely because, I mean, again, I don't think I can stress it enough. If your kids are not doing okay, they're not learning, and therefore they're not going to grow up to be lawyers. They're not going to grow up to be doctors. They're not going to grow up to be electricians either. We have to invest in our kids this way, and especially if we're going to pay for it on the backside, whether it's through services from the police departments, the jails, any other taxpayer funded relief program. I came from a divorced family as well, but I don't think that it had that effect on me like some of the other situations. I feel like, when I was a kid, a divorced family was pretty extreme kind of a situation. But now we have, drug use running rampant, violence running rampant, just creating so much unnecessary chaos in these children's lives. And so it's like, okay, well, no wonder we're having these issues. I don't know how to cope with this. How do you tell a kid how to cope with this? I had a friend who decided to go down the pathway of drugs and basically just neglected her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to step in. I tried to, be some type of a parental figure for her. But at the end of the day, I don't know how to explain why this was the choices that she was making instead of putting you as a priority.
Mm-hmm.
Why was this a priority versus you? And so when we aren't taking care of the families, then those kids are going to school, and then it's almost put on the school and the administrators and the teachers to try and fix that in the kids or help the kids through that. And that should not be part of their job. Their job is to educate.
Sure.
And I think what it's done is that it's opened the door for the state to come in and say, we know best, let us make these decisions. And then it's taken some of the thunder out of the parents like me, who is involved in my child's life, and they say, well, no, you don't need to be making this decision. An example would be in regards to, I was a part of an initiative in the Greeley school districts I wanted parents to be notified prior to a child checking out a book that we all knew was probably a little extreme for the child to be checking out, whether it was due to violence or sexuality, or a combination of both, because there was that a lot. And I wanted the parent to say, get a call from the librarian. Johnny wants to check out this book. You know what? I think Johnny's mature enough. I know my child.
Right.
I'm ready to be there for them. If they have any questions about this, yes, he can check it out. And they don't want that. And they say, well, if you have a problem with these books, you as a parent can restrict access for your child, but you can't make that decision for other people. Well, what about that single mom of 3 who's working, hopefully only one, but maybe two jobs, trying to make ends meet, doesn't have the ability to know, and they don't give us this information. Hey, here's a list of all the books in the library. You just have to know, and you have to go in and do your research. There's not the time. And so I think the destruction of the family has, one, created behavioral health issues, but also created the ability for the state to come in and say, let us take care of it. We'll make the decisions for everybody, despite, what you want to do or what you think is best. And if you think advocating for students whose parents are busy and cannot, be as aware of what's going on, that's not your business. That's our business. And so I feel like if we don't invest in our kids now, they're going to grow up to be adults, parents who are not able to pour into their kids. Because, so an example I think of, I've always said I wish there was a handbook on how to be a parent. And then on the Weld Faith Partnership Council, working with America's Kids Belong, they come out and they have this like little thing on how to parent children who've had trauma. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is perfect.
Yeah.
Can we get this just to everybody? Oh, you're pregnant? Here's a little pamphlet on how to, because even though there's not, maybe not direct trauma, a violence or whatever. My situation with my daughter, her dad passed away when she was 5. How do I navigate this?
Yeah,
because
wrong.
how do I make sure that my daughter's not on a stripper pole because she has daddy issues because he passed away when she was little? Like, how do I avoid this? And I wish I would have had something like that. Thankfully, my daughter's not in that situation. I do not foresee that happening. But that was because I was able to make it a priority to avoid that. But when you have little issues, you know, a book would be helpful.
It is, trauma is a huge thing. If you want to go to the foster care system, in Weld County, we have a massive push on to recruit foster families, to recruit adoptive families. But I think that the way that we recruit both foster and adoptive families needs to be different, because Julie and I went into the adoptive situation a little bit with blinders on, quite frankly. Okay, we're biologically unable to have kids, but yet there are kids that need a home. We are going to adopt a child. And of course, it was, you know, the picture of me and the picture of Julie, and all that was missing is this little puzzle piece of a child. And we'll get that, and they'll fit right in. No, they won't. There's a large chance that if you were going to foster or adopt a child through the foster and adopt program, through a social services program, you are likely going to be dealing with a child that has trauma. Trauma is a massive and unrecognized thing that we need to, well, it's not unrecognized. I just think it's undealt with, that we need to, as a society, wrap our brains around and understand that trauma is at the underlying issue of certainly some of my son's mental and behavioral health problems, but I think a lot of societal problems, because I think we have unrecognized trauma that we're simply not dealing with culturally.
Agreed. And I think, too, in regards to the adoption and foster, I mean, maybe more so the adoption system, we're no longer dealing with the unwed 17-year-old girl who got pregnant and was just, or, you know, young couple who got pregnant and said, we are not at a place to raise a child right now. We are now at a place of, you know, violence, drug use, severe stuff going on.
A lot of parental termination.
Yeah.
Or a lot of, parental, I guess that's what it is termination from, it's court ordered. It's, you know, God bless the woman who decides to have her child, even though she might not be in a situation to do so, and who says, I'm 17, I'm 18, I'm 19, I'm not ready for this baby, I'm going to have this baby, I'm going to put this baby up for adoption. God bless that individual, but that's more now the exception than the rule. The rule is violence and trauma in homes, and the rule has become court-ordered termination of parental rights.
Yeah.
And so that's just a reality. I'm not here to, I could comment all day long on the unfortunacy of that, but for our foster and adoptive families, they're likely going to be dealing with that situation now when they adopt out of social services.
So I know that you said Senator Kirkmeyer was able to kind of get a portion of it. And will any part of this bill be reran potentially in the next legislative session?
We're already scheming.
All right.
Yes,
Perfect.
no, absolutely. This is a passion for me. It has, yes, it's deeply personal. And at the same time, I see, the more I tell my story, and at the end of our podcast, I am happy to share my contact information. The more I share my story, the more I hear from parents go, it's like I was listening to my own life story.
Yeah.
And those type of parents, you know, and if you're having mental behavioral health issues with your child, call me, because the more that those kind of parents call us and seek one another out for help and support one another, the better that we are to tackle this problem and be advocates for things like Senate Bill 24-59 when it comes up.
Yeah.
I tried to explain 24-59 when it was first introduced to my wife, and trust me, she gets tired of me talking. But you know, so I would say that her education level is above the curve on some of this stuff. Nonetheless, just the common folk that are out there living life and pursuing happiness, you shouldn't have to deal with that. That's why you elect schmucks like me to go out there and represent you on. But we need to equip people that are both dealing with this in their own lives or have friends and family that are dealing with this to be advocates for that which we need, because quite frankly, the governor's voice was louder than the people's voice on this one, and we lost what would have been an impactful piece of legislation.
Definitely. I will definitely be watching, too, to see it come forward in the next session so that I can try and promote it and you know, advocate to people to get out there and to reach out to their senators or, you know, House reps when it gets to the House, you know, just to advocate for this, because why invest in our roads if we're not going to invest in the people who are going to be driving on those roads at some point in time?
I agree. And look, I'm a big road guy. I've been advocating for roads for years, but again, governing is about setting priorities and how you expend your dollars. And I think some of our priorities have been a little upside down over the last couple of decades, perhaps.
I agree. Especially, when we have school districts pushing for mill levy overrides to try and get more money for the kids. It's for the kids. It's for the kids. But then when we have something that, we all should truly get behind, whether you're a parent dealing with a child who is having issues, or you're not and you just know somebody, or you aren't even aware that this is a thing going on, you should still want what's best for our children. And this is a way that we can, this should, in my mind, be a bipartisan support. I don't understand why it wouldn't be. So, well, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
I really, really appreciate it.
Now, let me give my info.
I was just going to say,
All right.
go ahead. Give on your info.
I welcome your calls. My number is 970-227-8386. That's my cell phone. Call me, text me. I'm more than pleased to hear from you. And also, I have a personal website where I write a little bit about this, and all my contact information is my personal website. Just my name, Scott K, just my middle initial, scottkjames.com is my website, and you can learn more about me, read my stuff there, and contact me via that website.
Thank you so much, too, for offering just to be a support person, because I think, more than anything, that's what we need to do is to, if the government's not going to take care of us, right? Ha joke. We need to be there for each other. And at least, even if it's just in a, hey, I understand what it's like, and let me tell you, tomorrow's a new day and a better day, and just be encouragement that, that parent could use in that time.
It's one of the reasons that I am so massively supportive of the Weld Faith Partnership Council that you sit on. Just in the fact that, I as a government guy and as a conservative government guy, take a look at things through a lens of what is and is not the proper role of government. And I see plainly the human need, but government sometimes doesn't offer the fix. The fix lies in the faith community and just us as a community coming together to address that. So thanks for serving on that.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for joining us today, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.